So it looks like Delta Airlines and their pilots have come to a tentative agreement to essentially pay the pilots more and hopefully avoid a strike. And this is during a time, as you guys probably know, we keep talking about recession coming in 2023. Even the Fed is saying, hey, it might be a 50-50 chance. However, we're getting a lot of mixed signals, and sort of why I want to talk about the airline industry with you guys and also talk about jobs going into recession. Now, it seems that companies are indeed still hiring. We just got a jobs report here. You can see employees are adding workers, and it was higher than the estimates. However, there's a couple things that really stand out. One is inflation is still high, and two, you can see here wage growth is still up. Here, wage growth was up year over year, 5.1%. And this matters when you talk about like how much more the airline pilots are getting an increase. Now, part of what's going on with understanding the airline pilot situation, or even the flight attendants, which we're going to get into as well, is when you think about the job market, you want to think in terms of supply and demand, right? If the supply of workers is low, right, and the demand of them is high, then essentially wages will go up. One thing that is happening right now, according to the last job data, and this is something that we certainly be tracking on this channel, is what is going on with retirements, right? Because retirements, people essentially retire, right, don't come back, and you got to replace those workers. And one of the issue is, and it's something I want to talk with you guys about, is you got to find workers who can replace those retired workers, and you get essentially have the training and have the skills to where a company wants to hire you. And the reason why we're talking about skills is so important, right? Take a look at a company like an Amazon. They're laying off 20,000 employees right now. Yes, they are still in business, but they go through essentially employee profiles and departments to be like, okay, we need you. Okay, we don't need you. Okay, we need you. Okay, we don't need you. And you want to be essentially in the collection of employees to where a company and an organization needs you because you're essential to the functioning of that said company. Now, the pilot situation in the airlines is very interesting because the pilots have so much power. Essentially, if the pilots go on strike, there's no flights, right? And they're not easily replaced because of all of the regulations. You can't just put anyone in the plane. Plus, it takes a lot of skill to fly a passenger plane. And so essentially, they got pretty interesting concessions. So you can take a look at this. Delta Airline has offered 34% cumulative pay increase to its pilots over 3 years in a new contract, demonstrated the bargaining power aviators are enjoying in a short-staff industry with booming travel demand, right? So essentially, it's all about supply and demand. They need the pilots. There's not that many pilots, and so then you have a lot more bargaining power. And think about in your career, if you're not necessarily going to airlines, do you have a skill that is in high demand and short supply? That's essentially what you want to be in. Delta pilots will get a raise of at least 18% on the date the contract is signed, another 5% 1 year, 4% after 2 years, and 4% after 3 years. Also, too, they get this. They will also get a one-time payment equivalent to a cumulative 22% of their earnings between 2020 and 2022. This is a part where I thought was really fascinating. You can read it here. In the draft agreement, Delta promises that pay rates of its pilots will exceed those of United and American by at least 1%. So basically, they're like saying, hey, no matter what we decide, make sure you pay us more than the other two. And I think that is a really fascinating thing, and it makes me feel like, pilots essentially are like athletes playing it as, in a sports league, and like, yo, if you want me to play for your team, pay me more than the other team. And again, I want to reiterate this point over and over again, is if you're in a industry or job to where there's not many of you who can do what you do, you have a lot more bargaining power. So take a look at this, for example. This chart shows you all of the people that are retiring and their ages from pilots, and then the new batch coming in. In fact, there's a shortage. It's tough to get people to do it these days. And in fact, you take a look at this other chart. This is a supply and demand chart, and basically the supply of pilots is going down and the wages keep going up, right? And it'll probably keep going in that direction. You take a look at another chart like this. This is basically showing you we can't even get enough people in the USA to be pilots for a commercial aircraft. In fact, nearly 1 out of 5 are coming from another country. Now, we talked about retirements before, and what's interesting is that if you take a look at during the pandemic, the airlines encouraged a lot of people to retire, essentially gave them essentially a lot of buyouts. Now, what happened was they only thought that maybe 4% would take the deal. As it turned out, about 20% took the deal. So it was way more than they had expected, and essentially one of the reasons is why the airlines are shorthanded in many positions. Now, another reason why the shortage is there is, frankly, it's expensive to go to flight school. You can take a look at some of the costs, and I'll give you a rough estimate. Is around about $100,000 to become a commercial pilot these days. And in fact, another thing that's going on as well, it just takes a lot more flight time to be in the air in order to qualify. Now, there certainly is a high barrier, and the airlines are trying to figure out a way, like, how can we get more people into this thing? In fact, you can take a look at this Alaska Air. They open up their own flight school and essentially trying to give scholarships in order to get people to do this. United Airlines is doing the same thing, open up their sort of own flight school. I'm sure there are going to be more airlines that will probably do this. As long as the shortage increases, there's going to be more incentives. And sort of one of the things I want you to be thinking about in your career when you pursue something is pursue a career that, one, yes, you like, but two, have skills and talents that people need and are willing to pay for. Because if you're in the right area, in the right field, there's always going to be someone for you. And in this example, I'm showing you airline pilots, but there are other fields like that as well. Now, the thing is that always, it begs the question is like, okay, is the reward worth it? Well, if you take a look at this, and this is sort of where it needs to be attractive for people, right? Is that if it's a case costs $100,000 to train to be a pilot, the median income is about $173,000. So actually, the reward to price of entry isn't that bad. It actually is pretty good. Now, I want to move over to we just talked about pilots to flight attendants, which is also something that the airlines are hiring lately. And this is actually a tough job. I'm sure you guys know a lot of people were quitting. One was during the retirements during the pandemic, and also two, we have this problem, and this is just a real thing. Air rage is a real thing. Yes, you have passengers that are just unruly and difficult to manage. Also, too, the airlines aren't operating as smoothly as before. The reason was because many of the experienced people have left the profession, right? And then you have a lot of people who are less experienced. It doesn't mean they're like unqualified or anything like that, just less experienced. And this is sort of something to think about as well in your industry if you want to be a manager or leader in the future. Always value experience, because people who are experienced in their job, people who are experienced in their career, can do things more efficiently, and they can handle more, quote, unexpected kind of things a little bit better because they've seen it before. Another thing to take a look at as well is when you think about some of the things that are facing, say, flight attendants, remember, because they're hiring also, is you have to deal with a lot of passengers are drinking these days, which is a real thing with that. And in the past, too, the flight attendants had to deal with a lot of passengers that were really mad over the mask policy. But these days, those things are starting to loosen. Also, too, regarding the flight attendant job, it seems that they're also becoming more strict on enforcing regulations and penalties on passengers. If you guys follow the channel, we made a video a few months back about the kid who essentially had to be duct taped on the flight because he was like attacking people and touching people, and it was a bad situation. As it turns out, he got a sentence to prison. You guys can see this here. So in fact, here you can take a look. Another passenger recently got jail time. So I think this is a good thing for the flight attendants and the airline industry as a whole. My personal opinion is respect other people, especially when you go on a flight. There's just, other people in the world other than you. And one thing that I always mention as well is learn to get along with each other. So I think these will certainly make the job look more attractive. Now, in terms of pay for flight attendants, it's not bad. Actually, you can see here the median salary is about $81,000. I know we have actually people in our community that work as flight attendants, so I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts on this, if this sounds about right to you. And I was looking now, and this is not just Delta, but Delta is one of the airlines that's hiring. They literally just opened it up. Southwest is also adding 8,000 employees going into next year. So I don't want you to think that, I work for Delta and only promoting Delta jobs, that kind of stuff. I was just using them as an example because the end of the day, make sure you got to have those skills and those talents that people are willing to pay for, and that you're always going to be in demand. And the other issue I want you to think about as well, and we've talked about several times in this channel, when you go to work daily, be someone who's pleasant, and your coworkers have a good opinion of you. They say, oh, you show up on time, you are reliable. When I ask you to help me something, you do it, you smile, and you help each other out. And then when you need their help, they also help you. And in return, for example, I'm saying that I was mentioning that I'm not just promoting Delta. It's like, so let's say, for example, you're work at, Alaska, and your coworker leaves and they go to another airline, we'll say JetBlue, and they say, hey, over at JetBlue, we're getting paid more, conditions are better, bosses are better, come on over, I'll help you get a job. That's how the world works. It is have skills that people want, that they're going to pay you for. be the kind of person that your coworkers like, and you're going to be hearing about opportunities through your network, and you can do well, because I promise you, going into recession, it's going to get really, really ugly in some industries. And so always be figuring out how to position yourself to be well and do good in the future. So hopefully this is helpful for you guys. I want you guys to do well, and I'd love to hear some feedback on, say, just the airline industry. Where are they hiring? Where are they not hiring? And do you guys think salaries are going to be going up, and by how much? Love to hear your thoughts and comments on these things. Thanks again, everyone, and I'll catch you in the next video.